Welcome back. This is actually our first lecture where we're actually going to be covering a theory in here. So up to this point we've been doing some foundational work. I would also like to point you to your syllabus and one of your assignments where you're required to keep a theories journal, right? And this should be the first of your journal entries. You don't need any on the ones up to this point. If you've been doing them, that's fine. You can turn them in. But from here on out, every theory that we cover, not every day of class, like so for today we may be covering more than one theory, right? Like not for every class, but for every theory, you need to write a journal entry on how it intersects with your everyday life. Do you see examples from your life where these are coming true, right? An element of the theory that especially rings true to you. And I want to reiterate, the journal is not a place for you to regurgitate to me about the theory. I already know what the theory is, but instead how it intersects with your life. Symbolic Interactionism is developed from George Herbert Mead. Also, make sure that you read the chapters as well that correspond with these. These lectures are meant to go along with those, and if you don't read the chapter, you're really not going to get as much out of it as if not. So the basis of symbolic interactionism is obviously with the word symbolic in there, right? You can get a good sense that we're kind of in the semiotic tradition, right? Because we're interested in semiotics. This theory falls between the semiotic and the sociocultural tradition. And we're really interested in here is the way that human beings act towards people or things based on how you assign meaning to those things. Let me pull this up here. It's through communicating and social interaction with people that we come to assign meaning to certain kind of people. So you can think about the different kind of people that you know. All right, I think of myself as a teacher sometimes. We attach labels to everything. Things mean things to us. Words aren't the only things that mean things. People mean things to us. So as a teacher, right, if you're sitting in a class with me, and online classes is maybe not quite the same, but if you're sitting in a class with me in a classroom, I'm likely going to give you a label. Not likely, I just am, right? What kind of student are you? Who are you to me? Are you the class clown? Are you the kiss-up? Are you the dedicated student, right? Are you the slacker who sits in the back, right? Now, we get all these kind of meanings, right? And we do this with our friends too, our family members, etc. What symbolic interactionism is interested in is the way that these are socially created through language, right? These labels exist, we put them on people, but then we act towards people as if those labels exist, right? So I'm going to treat you when you're the class clown, right? If you come and ask for an extension on a paper, in my cognitive process is going to be very different if you're the class clown versus you're the studious student, right? Or I mean, any of those categories would work here. So we assign meaning to those people based on the social interactions we have with them. Now, where do these come from, right? Where do these meanings come from? Well, they come from our interactions with each other. They come from like how I perceive you, what kind of clothes you wear, how you carry yourself, previous interactions with you, etc. So these symbols, right? The symbols that we put on people, and remember, symbols are things that stand in for other things, is a fundamental part of what it means to be human. This theory argues that's really one of the things that separates us from animals, is this ability to name. And the symbolic interactionism point sometimes they use as kind of a metaphor for talking about the importance of this, back to the Genesis creation story, when one of the first assignments or tasks given to people was to name things. And what that indicated, the ability to name things, demonstrated a certain kind of dominance, right? We give names to things that are lesser than us, right, rather than the other way around. The act of naming someone is really a fundamentally an act of power, right? So our kids don't name us, we name our kids, for example. With this language, right, are our assumptions and our understandings of reality. All right, so if we go back to the sociocultural tradition, right, it's all about how it is that we engage the world, right? These assumptions help us with our perception, not they help us, they filter our perception. They are what we are, the way that we see the world. Now, I don't know why I did that, sorry. Another really important aspect of this theory is the idea of taking the other. So what we can do is we can get meta about our communication according to symbolic interactions. So the one thing I can do is, right, I can look at you and I can put a label on you, right? Well, what we can also do is we are also mindful of the labels that people put up on us. We experience empathy. We experience empathy in a way that we can assume how other people feel. We can put ourselves in other people's situations. We do this all the time. I keep going back to this example, right? But say you want to ask for an extension on a paper or something. Before you did that, you would likely put yourself in my position and think, what would I like to hear if I were sitting there? Right? You can see the world through my eyes. And similarly, I can do it through yours, right? So while I do these lectures, I imagine how they would look and sound to a student. Now, this is really important because the idea of taking the others, our symbolic projections are not all that there is. There's also, here, I think we're getting another one here. There's also have the ability to perceive ourselves, right? This is the things that make us self-conscious. We do things like maintain our image, maintain who we are. And we often try to change labels, but when labels are put on us, it's difficult. And so it's not only, right, if we want to think back to this example of you being a student, right? So I put a label on you, right, whatever kind of student you are. And then you can also, and so that influences the way that I interact with you and communicate with you. You perceive a label, right? You can probably get a sense of what a teacher thinks about you, right? And that influences how we communicate with each other. And then it's happening the other way around as well, right? You have labels that you would put on your teacher, and your teacher is probably cognizant of the kind of labels that you might have of them. And right, the same way that there are a lot of different kind of students there can be a lot of different kind of teachers, right? There can be the boring professor, there can be the quote-unquote cool professor, there can be, right, the PowerPoint professor, there can be the circle up and talk kind of professor, there's the professor you call by your first name, right, versus the professor you call Dr. So-and-so. These are all different kinds of professors that a person could be, and these are all labels you would put on this. So we have like 4 different meta levels there that are influencing the way that we interact with each other. We have my perception of you, your perception of what my perception of you is, your perception of me, and my perception of what your perception of me is. And so we're both taking the role of the other in that situation. Now, the symbolic interactionism breaks down our identities into 2 different kinds, right? We have the me and we have the I. Now, the I is the spontaneous and more instinctual. The I is the part of you that's less concerned with symbolic, right? The party that's not concerned with what other people think. Right, so they're all things that we wish we could do. They're all people we wish we could tell off before, but you can't, right? You just don't end up doing it for whatever reasons, right? The instinctual part of you maybe you don't want to be sitting there listening to a lecture right now, etc. Right, you'd rather be outside playing hooky, right? Playing outside, going out with friends, etc. That's the I that is spontaneous and instinctual. That is in contrast to the me, which is the socially aware part of you. It's more deliberate and consciously symbolic, right? There's no me at birth. It only comes through repeated social interactions with others. Our me is something that is cultivated. So while I'm not stupid, right? I imagine there are other things you would rather be doing right now. The I of you would. But the me of you, right? So let me ask you, why are you sitting here and watching this? Well, there's a me that is socially aware, right? You know what happens if you don't end up doing this, right? You will probably fail the class. I will put a label on you of a slacker, and you will not be able to get what it is that you want. The same way that, right, so an example of this is I have a 4-year-old son, and we were at the post office the other day, and he turns to me, right, and points to the guy directly behind us in line and says, "That guy's really fat." Well, what is he's 4, right? The reason why I don't point to that guy and tell my son that guy's really fat is because I have a me, right? A me that's socially aware. Now, what are the labels that I would be likely to get if I turned to that guy and said, "You're fat," right? Rude, obnoxious, right? It's just not something that you do. And you know what? We're about 10 minutes. We'll continue with this point here in a minute. I'll be right back.